My name is Joshua King, and this is my informative speech. Have you ever wanted a hobby that is both relaxing and exciting at the same time? Hobby that people have been doing for thousands of years all around the world, and yet it is still being constantly improved on every day. Fishing is a way of life for millions of people around the world. Not only to provide food in some areas, but also as a sport and a hobby in other areas of the world. I was introduced to fishing as a very young kid. My dad fished a lot of bass fishing tournaments, and I was introduced to bass fishing at a very young age. My dad had a dream of joining the Bass Masters. That didn't really pan out, but as a result, I've been bass fishing and fishing in general my whole life. Many people don't know what all goes into fishing. They don't understand the variables that go into it. It's not all about just the lure you're using. It's also about the fish's pattern, finding the fish, knowing where to go, and learning a brand new lake. Many people think fishing is just boring. They think you're just throwing out a lure, reeling it back in, and that's all there is to it. But it's really, there's a lot more that goes into it than that. One of the main things is you gotta learn fish's patterns. You gotta know what to use as a lure. For example, you won't fish for catfish with a spinner bait, and you won't fish for bass with catfish bait. Fish follow certain patterns, and you got to learn those patterns. You got to learn the lake that you're fishing and all of that stuff. For example, I'd like to talk about striped bass. Striper are actually a saltwater fish that are able to spawn in Lake Texoma due to the high salt content of the lake. Now, these fish follow a certain pattern. They mostly chase bait fish around the lake. But for example, during the summer months, they tend to surface and hit the top of the water. And that's when you'd like to use a topwater lure or a slab, depending on the time of day. They tend to surface during the late evenings or early mornings. And if you're fishing during the middle of the day, you'd like to use a slab. And during the winter months, they tend to school deep down around structure. And that's when you'd like to use live bait, such as live shad. This varies for other kinds of fish too. Another thing would be for bass fishing. During the spring months, bass tend to school up, or they tend to nest and spawn around close to shore. So they aren't really looking for food around those times. They're mainly defending their nest against other fish. So you want to fish close to shore, maybe use a lure that drags along the bottom, such as a Texas rig or a Carolina rig. And it varies species to species. They all spawn during different times of the year. It really varies. It even varies with bass species, such as, I was mainly referring to largemouth bass, but smallmouth bass do the same thing, but they are much more aggressive, so they are better for using swim baits with. They tend to attack a lot more aggressive than largemouth bass do. Another thing I would like to point out is, you gotta learn the depth, you gotta deal with the barometric temperature day to day. Fish tend to like it when the barometric temperature is falling, right before like a thunderstorm or a cloudy day. Those are really good for fishing. And whenever it's really sunny and hot out, there's blue skies, you can still catch fish, but it will not be as good. They're not as aggressive. I don't fully know the science back behind that, but I just know that's a variable. One of the best things that I love about fishing is it's a very relaxing hobby. You're out in nature, you're out on the open water. I just think, lakes are beautiful. You're out in nature, and it can go from being very relaxing. For example, I'd like you to picture you're out here on the water, you're fishing, it's sunset, the water's clear as glass, and all of a sudden you just see a fish jump up, a 3 or 4 pound bass, jump out of the water, grab your top water bait, and then it goes from just being very relaxing to being very, very exciting, where you're fighting with that fish, trying to pull it into the boat. And that is one of the great things about fishing, is it goes from being very relaxing to being very exciting. Another thing about fishing is you're constantly improving. You're constantly learning. You're constantly getting better at it. Whenever you fish a new lake, they're normally always different. You got to learn how to fish them differently. You got to find spots on them. Another great thing about bass fishing and fishing in general is exploring a lake. You got to explore a lake, find good fishing spots. You know, that's one of the great things about it that I'd also like to point out. Fishing can be very exciting. It's very, very rewarding. Whenever you work at it and you're learning the lake, you figure out where to go fish, where the fish are at in that particular period, and you're catching a lot of them. It's very rewarding, especially whenever you hook onto a massive fish. The adrenaline rush you get is just purely amazing. Whenever you got to fight that fish and you finally get it in the boat, is a very rewarding feeling, and it's something that I love about fishing. In conclusion, I'd like to just go over everything. Fishing is a very relaxing but yet exciting hobby. It is something people constantly improve on, something you can always get better at, and it's just all around a great hobby that allows you to be in nature. It is a great stress reliever. I tend to, whenever I'm out here, all the stress that I'm dealing with in day-to-day life, it all just tends to go away and go to the back of your mind. And it's all around a great hobby. It's very rewarding when your work pays off. You finally learn a lake, learn how to fish it right, learn the fish's patterns, and it is very rewarding. Thank you for listening, and that'll be it.